Hello, everyone, and welcome to the new season of the Purposeful Life Show with your host, Adrian Starks. I'm excited to share some new updates of the show with you, starting with a new look, sound, and energy, as well as a variety of guests coming aboard with intriguing topics of conversation. I hope you enjoy the new level of energy that will be brought to the show. Thank you for all of your support since the very beginning in 2019. Wow, it's been 3 years already? Because of you, the Purposeful Life Show is now in the top 5% of all podcasts globally, and we aim to get it into the top 1%. Continue listening to the show and share it with others. You can also now listen to the show on my Facebook page at Adrian Starks, where you can comment in real time and communicate with me about your aha moments. Thank you again for all of your support, and let's make this one hell of a year and be purposeful about doing that. Wishing you all much love and success. What happens in your life when an unexpected change arises? A serious illness, a breakup, or a loss of a loved one or your job? Are these feelings of fear, sadness, loneliness, and anxiety or anger? There probably are. Could there be an underlying grief that has triggered these emotions even further? What happens when we learn to have a discussion about grief and how to accept and address it as it arises? This could possibly help us to stop ignoring ourselves and show up in every situation wholeheartedly, allowing us to get through it much sooner. Join us on our new episode with special guest Yvonne Heath, Loving Your Life to Death. Hi, my name is Adrian Starks, and welcome to the Purposeful Life Show on the Champion Up Podcast. This podcast is for the courageous creators wanting to create a life of meaning, adventure, and fulfillment, all while helping to make the world a better place. I'm happy you're here, and if you're new to our show, make sure to give us that 5-star rating and subscribe so you don't miss out on future episodes. Also, connect with us on Facebook and Instagram at Champion Up. It is always that one idea that could be your breakthrough. It's time to step into your courage and believe the champion in you. Welcome to the Champion Up Podcast. My name is Adrian Starks. I'm your host, and this is the Purposeful Life Show, and we're happy to have you back for another amazing episode. Before we get started today, make sure you give us that 5-star rating and subscribe to the show so you don't miss out on the future content coming your way. Today is a loving episode, and we're going to talk about loving your life to death. We have a special guest on today, and her name is Yvonne Heath. And Yvonne, can you say hello to our audience?
Hello, audience. I am absolutely thrilled to be here.
Well, we're absolutely thrilled to have you here because we want to learn how to love our life to death, because I believe that a lot of us are dying emotionally and we're not finding out ways how to cope with things going on around the world. So we want to learn from you about how to do this, Yvonne. So thank you today for just showing up.
Just showing up. I am so glad you invited me. Thank you for that.
You're very welcome. And a little bit about Yvonne here. So Yvonne spent 27 years of nursing. Yvonne has also worked in the US and Canada in many areas, including emergency, intensive care, chemotherapy, and hospice. She became disheartened by society's reluctance to prepare for grief, causing excessive suffering in life and at the end of life. She suffered too, not knowing how to do it differently. Yvonne left her career to create change as an author, speaker, television and radio host, and her TEDx talk. We'll be talking about a little bit later. She is sharing her message with the world and helping great organizations along the way. Yvonne is also excited to share the I Just Showed Up movement. Whoa, Yvonne, welcome today.
Thank you. I love hearing all of that. I'm not going to lie.
Well, it is definitely worth saying. I mean, you're creating this movement called Just Showed Up, and I want to talk about that a little bit later in our segment here today. But let's get into this here about loving your life to death. So you were a nurse that transitioned into an award-winning author, international speaker, and change maker. In those 27 years in the medical field of nursing, when was the moment, Yvonne, that you decided that being a nurse was no longer a fit to you and you wanted to serve the world in a different way?
I love that question because there were many, many defining moments, but there was certainly December 2009, to be precise, when I truly realized that as a healthcare professional, as a mother, as a human being, I was ill prepared for grief as it shows up throughout life. And I had worked, as you said, in many different departments, and I would see people over here who were having honest conversations and hard conversations and getting through the challenges of life. And then on the other side, people who were angry and bitter and weren't having those conversations. And I know I absorbed so much of that, and I suffered excessively. But that December 2009 was the beginning of our journey with our son, Tyler, who spiraled down a dangerous road of drugs and addiction. And I realized as I sat back, I thought, I don't know if I will survive this. I realized that I had no coping skills, no strategies to prepare for what could be and to navigate this road. And so that started this journey 10 years ago, actually.
10 years ago of this journey of changing that. How does it feel, Yvonne, to touch people at such a personal level right now of grief in their lives and to be able to navigate personally and professionally on this new career path, helping others?
Adrian, I have to tell you, I am so excited and honored and privileged every day to be able to just show up for people without suffering excessively. I grieve. I grieve sometimes, but I do not suffer excessively because I have reframed my perspective. I have developed coping skills and strategies. And the biggest thing is I haven't started caring less. I've just started accepting more.
Let's just go back on that one there. You haven't stopped caring less.
I haven't started caring less.
You just started
accepting more.
Accepting more. Wow, that's powerful.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Well, it is not my job to judge or to fix everyone's journey, but I can love them and support them along the way. And that's what I'm choosing to do.
I love that. Completely amazing. Let's talk about grief. Exactly. Now, I know that some people, including myself, I'll be the first one to raise my hand to this. When we think of grief, we associate it with predominantly like death. Something has happened, someone's died, or you've lost someone, and all of a sudden here comes this grief.
Yes.
What is it exactly, and can it impact anyone at any time in their life?
I absolutely agree with you. Most people think grief, death, hand in hand. And so we don't recognize those feelings along the journey of life. But the truth is that grief is a part of everyone's journey, regardless of age, race, culture, sexual orientation, ability, disability, economic situation. And I define grief as our mental, physical, and emotional reaction to loss, change, or transitions. Okay. It's whatever makes your heart ache, isn't it? You experience grief in divorce, diagnosis, job loss, mental health issues, bullying. It's all on the continuum of grief. Okay. And we don't think about grief. We don't prepare for grief. People say, well, I don't want to talk about that.
Of course.
Don't wait till you want to talk about it. And most of us, when someone has died and our hearts are broken into a million pieces, then we try to navigate through when we're broken and in crisis. And when we think about that, wouldn't it be wise for us to be proactive, talking to children and teens and everyone about grief and saying, yep, grief is a part of this journey. And the beautiful thing is sometimes it's the price of living and loving, but it is worth it. And our hearts will heal if we learn to take better care of ourselves and each other.
Beautifully said. I like how you said too, when we go through this moment of grief in our lives, it's better to be prepared for it and to be in this state where we are able to navigate through it on a healthy term, as opposed to being broken and then trying to navigate through it or help someone else, which usually happens for a lot of people because they don't talk about it. They don't want to know about it until it actually happens. And this is quite interesting, Yvonne. You know, I've always considered it to be primarily a loss with death, but now I know differently. You've taught me something, and I know that our audience today will learn that as well.
Yes.
Is it possible that people are grieving right now and don't even know that they're grieving?
The answer is absolutely. People are grieving everywhere. every day, and they don't recognize it. Do you know how we can teach this to children? And I will tell you. So we have a
Okay.
25-year-old and 14-year-old twins, and the twins have been a part of this journey since I wrote my book 4 years ago. And I've said to them, they'll come home and they'll say, wow, Joe was really crabby on the bus today, and he was being really irritable and everything. And I said, and I'll stop them and I'll say, what do you think could be happening with Joe? You go, I know, Mom, he could be grieving something, right? We don't recognize, we think grief, oh, someone's crying. Grief can affect it. First of all, it affects everyone differently. We all navigate through grief differently. Some people some people don't cry. Like my husband doesn't cry very often. At first, I thought he was a man of steel. I'm like, don't you have hearts? What's the matter? No, he just grieves differently.
Yeah.
I can't stop crying. If you ask him, how many times have you seen Yvonne cry? He would have to say, like, do you mean this week? Because I wear my heart on my sleeve and I cry. Some people are angry. Some people are just, they're confused and they can't think. There's so many things that we don't recognize that is grief. And why should we really, Adrian? Where do we talk about grief before grief arrives?
True. Nowhere. And I love how you're saying that it's good for our younger generation too to start learning about this, because I do see a need and a cry out for help in the younger generations, especially with the bullying going on in schools, the shootings that are going on as well too. And this is not even to mention the shootings that are going on around the world. So I believe that this world is in a state of grief.
We are in a state of grief, and so many people, we always have a choice, right? And I say to people, you can focus and say, oh my gosh, the world is awful. There's shootings and there's this and there's that. And I say, we have a choice in this, right? We can continue to fuel the negative, or we can say, what can I do to change that? And here's the thing, that each and every one of us has that power for change, right? I mean, I just think of little me, who was a nurse for many years, and in this little room, I created all this stuff, and I've reached people, thousands of people have reached out to me. I am one person. I was a nurse. I mean, I had never written a book. It's when I decided to write a book, people laughed at me and said, what do you mean you're writing a book? I said, I know. But one thing that happened, and I was sitting right here when I decided that moment, that epiphany, I said, oh my gosh, I'm going to write a book. And I sent out one email and I said, I want to write a book. I want to hear people. I don't want surveys and statistics. I want people's real, true, raw, gritty stories of being in the deep trenches of grief and getting through to the other side and finding joy in their lives again. I said, will anyone share their story with me? So do you know what happened?
What happened?
5 years later, which is now, the stories haven't stopped coming.
Oh, wow.
And that is what changed my life. And that is, I wrote my book. I shared people's stories ages 11 to 101. And when I'm speaking, I share stories. And on television and radio, I share people's stories. And that is one of the greatest ways we can heal the world and each other. Acknowledging and allowing our own pain, allowing other people's pain and their journey, and just showing up for ourselves and each other.
That's amazing. I am right now thinking in terms of like what I may be grieving that I don't know about and what I have not addressed. And it puts me into a state of wanting to reflect on that. For our audience today, you could be grieving and you may not know it. And this grieving, as Yvonne has said, comes out in many ways. It can come out of sadness, anger, confusion, being irritated with someone and they didn't even irritate you. There's a lot of methods here that grief finds its way to communicate with us. Yvonne, did you ever have a moment in your life when you were so challenged by grief that you said, enough is enough and I need to make a change?
Absolutely. I've had, like I said, the moments kind of piled on top of each other. And in the last couple of years in working chemotherapy, so many patients, because I loved people and I hugged them, and like, I don't know if you know yet, but I'm really funny and I would make them laugh. and I was there and I was suffering along with them, and it was challenging. But they would come to me on the side sometimes because I would dig in, and they would say, I don't want this chemotherapy. I don't want this surgery. I don't want to go the intensive care. And I would literally say, like, please tell your family, tell your doctor. And they said, no, they don't want me to give up. And there was just one story piled on top of the other. And one more story, and I went, that's it, where I said, we are not in each other's lives forever. We are meant to live as long as we live and then pass the baton on to the next generation. I mean, we have to wrap our heads around death is not the enemy. End of life is just, it's a part of this journey. I love my life and I want to live a long time. I don't want to be 500 years old, right? I mean, we all die at some point. We have to just acknowledge and allow that. But there was one patient that was coming to our clinic for a blood transfusion who had already told her doctor she didn't want them, but he convinced her to have one more because it might help her feel well, which works very briefly. Would you like to know how old she was?
How old was she?
105.
Wow, centurion.
Now, at 105, it's still not okay to allow a natural death. They just said, we're treating people, right? We're hanging on, we're white knuckling it and treating people to death and trying to keep people alive as long as possible when the quality of their life is no longer something that they're happy with.
Yeah.
It's selfish. I'm sorry. And so I just went, okay. All right, universe, okay, I hear you. So, I got it. I'm going to do something. And it's been an extraordinary, life-changing journey.
You were certainly a change maker because you talk about your career being a nurse and being in this field for 27 years and then saying, I need to make a change here and I'm seeing what's going on. How can I improve my world, not just the world, but my world? And how can I help others? And now you are doing that. And this is why you're on this show as a courageous creator, because you are creating these magnificent experiences for everyone. I want to go back to the whole baton scenario that you mentioned. It really gave me a light bulb moment because it is true that as human beings, we have a very short time here on this planet. So for our audience listening, you have a very short time on this planet. And it's not something to be scared of, but just to acknowledge and to respect, because we have to realize we got to pass on the baton eventually at some point. And I had this moment in my life, Yvonne, where I was afraid to look at cemeteries. I would drive by.
Interesting.
I would pass by these cemeteries. And even if I was on public transit, this was like maybe 10 years ago, and I would be riding the buses and I just look away really fast because I associated it with, of course, death. And I was like, nope, not me. I don't want to go over there. That's scary. But then I had this reality of years later when I started understanding the cycle of life, this life and death cycle, and that we cannot evade life. It's just saying that, you can't get out of life alive. I mean, it's
right, absolutely.
So when you think of that, you're like, oh yeah, that's right. And so people will try to extend that, like you were mentioning with the woman that was 105 years old. They try to extend. And it's like, well, no, at some point we do pass and we do transition. And we've got to understand and respect that with that situation of life. So now I look at the cemetery with respect. Awesome. And I say, this is a place where someday it will ask me back because I believe I came from a source. And so I'm not ready right now, but if that time comes, I'm not going to fight it either. You mentioned this in your talk, and we're going to talk about this a little bit later. Your TEDx talk, which is amazing for the audience members who have to listen to this. In your words, we don't need a PhD to simply love or help someone. Whoa, that was powerful. I had to stop that video, and go backwards and hear that quote again.
Really? I love that.
Yeah, I'm going to say it one more time for our audience here. We don't need a PhD to simply love or help someone. So what is an action step an audience member can take today to help someone with grief or even help themselves?
So first of all, Adrian, I love that you actually watched my TED Talk and it spoke to you because, it was incredible to share. And the thing that we think is that someone is grieving in crisis, suffered a loss, having a really bad day. Oh, here's the counselor, here's the volunteer, we push it out, the doctor, I'm not qualified. What I need to let people know, first of all, professionals, yes, we need professional help many times in our life. They will be available a very small percent of our day, of our time. Because when we think about someone's having a hard time, it's 24/7. Professionals will be involved a small fraction of the time. The last 5 years of interviewing hundreds of people, the things that made the greatest impact that people remember forever? Hug, text, email, call, sit silently, help with life's daily tasks, walk the dog, cut the grass, pick up kids, bring food. All of these things that what people said, they said, I would ask an audience when I was doing a speaking engagement, what made the greatest, what meant the most to you when your father died? You know, my neighbor came over and he shoveled the walkway and he left a little note. In memory of your dad, I shoveled the walkway. In all the things that meant so much to her, that was it. We all can make a difference. We are all qualified. And it's what people say, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to say. Say, just show up. And, or if you know them well, think of things that would help them throughout, or ask, I'm going to bring you lunch. Would you like a hamburger or a hot dog? Right? Because when you're grieving, it's hard to think sometimes. But if you can anticipate, okay, you know what? Joe's garbage needs to go out and he hasn't left the house. I'm going to go take the garbage out. Because the thing is, when we're grieving or in crisis, the rest of life keeps going on, doesn't it?
It certainly does.
Your kids still need to drive to karate. They like all of these things. Just show up. I promise you can make a difference, or you could make the difference.
Just show up.
Just show up.
That is a catchy phrase, and I love it. Just show up. When someone has lost something or someone, our natural inclination, Yvonne, is to be strong for them. We've heard this before. Just be strong. Don't show them that you're sad too.
Oh.
Is this helping the person by doing that, or should we grieve with them?
Well, it's helping create mental health issues for us. And again, we really complicate this whole thing, don't we? We complicate life, we complicate grief, we complicate death.
Mm-hmm.
And so my answer to that was, if you feel strong, be strong. If you're grieving, acknowledge and allow all feelings, yours and theirs. I don't know what to say, but I'm here. I'm having a really hard time. I'm so sad too. Imagine people feel, I have to be strong for the kids. I promise you, my children, when we're grieving, when our family's grieving something, I'm not strong for the kids. I'm a hot mess like everyone else. And we grieve together. Human beings are very compassionate, but we're scared to death of feelings, right? Or like people say, what if I make them cry? Say, oh my goodness, get them a tissue. What if I cry? Oh, well, then cry together. Like, we're so afraid to make things worse. We don't realize that by not acknowledging and allowing all feelings, yours and theirs, that compounds suffering. That is what compounds suffering. So if you feel strong, be strong. And if you don't, just allow your humanness. Allow your humanness.
And I like what you said as well about just showing up and saying, I don't know what to say right now, but I'm here. I feel sad too.
Mm-hmm.
And this helps, and it doesn't compound anything into a negative way, but it allows a person to know that they are being seen. And I think that's the big thing with us, is to be seen and to be heard.
Yes.
And that's what's going on in society right now. I believe is not enough people are being seen and heard, and because we're trying to keep it together. We've heard that too, right? Keep it together for them. Got to stay strong. Can't show them that I'm vulnerable, or else I'll be considered weak. All of these self-debilitating things that we tell ourselves, or we've been taught to believe, that has deconditioned us from feeling empathy and compassion for people, which is why I feel people are not just showing up, because they don't know how to. And two, if they do, they're afraid that their vulnerability may be seen as a weakness. And that's not true.
So not true. Being vulnerable is one of the most courageous things we can do.
Mm-hmm.
And we do put so much pressure on ourselves, and we want to fix it, right? And that's why we don't feel qualified. I don't know how to fix this. Say, oh, well, here's the good news, everyone. It's not your job to fix that. Right? We can't fix someone else by listening to someone's story. And here's a little side note. Here's a beautiful thing you can do when someone is telling you their story. Just listen. Don't tell them your story. Right? So many people we want to relate. And so we tell them our horrible story. It's like, oh, because I just thought we were talking about me, but now we're hearing your story. Just listen. Tell your story another time, right?
It's funny
Just
you said that. I've had that happen to me
oh
where
yeah,
you're expressing a story to someone, and all of a sudden that person, they've been waiting the whole entire time to interject what they want to say. You know
absolutely.
what? That happened to me too. And
Oh,
and actually, and then your story just got thrown away. And then you're like, well, maybe my story is not so bad after all. And then you just totally have suppressed that feeling. Everyone, don't do that. If someone's expressing a
don't
story to
do
you,
that.
listen to the story.
Don't answer the story with your story, please.
Yes. Don't
Please,
answer the story with your story.
your story. Yes.
This is quite fascinating. I'm loving this conversation. This is an actual, very important conversation to have around grief. And for our audience, you hear how Yvonne and I are talking, but we're also laughing because grief is not something that you have to just be in a corner somewhere and feel like the world is down on you. Grief is dealing with the emotion that is present at the time and allowing it to be expressed through your words, through your feelings, through how you interact. It's totally okay. But there's more to Yvonne here. We're getting into this. Yvonne, you have a book called Love Your Life to Death.
Yes.
I love this title. It is to die for.
Well played there, Adrian. I like that.
Well, this book is also heart-touching. In this book, you say the best time to talk about and plan and prepare for grief or death and dying is when you are young and healthy. We touched base on this earlier in the conversation, but we're going to go wrap back around to that. When we're talking about grief, it's a very touchy subject. But why is it so important for us to talk and plan about it and prepare for it when we're young and healthy?
So the scenarios that I have seen, again, in 27 years of nursing and the last 5 years of interviewing people have absolutely confirmed my conviction. So imagine that we can normalize anything, can't we? Right? Because I always say we can normalize anything because back in the day, people smoked cigarettes in the hospital. The doctors, the nurses, the patients, everyone smoked.
Really?
Imagine. Oh, I know, it's disgusting, but it was normal. Like no one questioned it. Hey, do you have a light? Do you have an ashtray? Let's have a smoke together. And now someone would literally be escorted off the property, fined, like it would just, right, be this big uproar. Imagine if so people turned 18 and we just normalized that, oh, you turn 18, you're an adult, you do an end of life plan. Are you an organ donor? And you had it was normal to, what do you believe about life and death? And, what would your preferences be? Because you're not talking about it because you're going to die today. You're just having that conversation. And then a couple of years later, you get married. So you add your wife as the beneficiary, then you have children, then you get a divorce, take her off the thing. Sorry, that's terrible. But let's be honest, it happens.
It happens.
So imagine a world where we normalize those conversations and then just every decade, every 5 years, whatever, you just update it as you went along. So by the time you were facing end of life, first of all, if you died of old age, because we do not all die of old age and we do not all get a warning. So if that person, and I'm sorry, this is the tough, love, hard conversation.
It is. It's good. We need to know it.
Right? This is tough, I know. If that person died when they were 19, some trauma, whatever happened, and all of that stuff was in place so that the family could just get to grieving. They didn't have to wonder about burial, whether they'd be an organ donor. All that was just done. And that's what I'm talking about, eliminating that excessive suffering, trying to figure all of this stuff out. That's all done. You just get to grieving and supporting each other. Or, because the other piece is, by doing that and updating as you go along, you also never have to have the talk where, oh, someone was just diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. Ooh, I guess we should talk about their funeral plans. Ugh, how awkward. Or someone's 85 and they haven't had the talks, like, hey, Dad, time's a ticking. You're 85. We should have the talk. Wouldn't it be wonderful to eliminate all of that and just normalize these conversations? because we do not all die of old age and we do not all get a warning. Those are the hard facts. So let's just get that stuff out of the way, because another thing I have witnessed time and time again are families fractured beyond repair because everyone thinks that different things should happen. Someone in a crisis and they think they should be on life support, they think they should not. Family fights, never speaking again. We can eliminate all that by having these conversations throughout life.
I love that. And you mentioned that not all of us are going to die of old age and to even get a warning. So we might as well visit this conversation and start to plan and prepare so that when we do get to that moment in time, and if we are surprised by something, which happens to a lot of people, they get straight to the grieving process and not the avoidance of it.
Exactly.
Because the avoidance of it is where a lot of the energy goes and where a lot of people break down to a point of, it's not about grief, it's about them being unwilling to accept this moment in time, which for the audience listening, I understand, Yvonne understands, it happens when you have something happen. You may not want to accept it right away as your reality. I mean, we all have that brief moment in time, but you have to get to the point where you can accept it so that you can move through it, so that you can just show up, because you're not going to be present if you don't.
It's a big topic, isn't it?
It's a big topic. It's a heavy topic because many people don't like talking about that.
Oh, I know. Yeah.
And for my audience listening, you're probably thinking, well, why are we talking about grief, on this Courageous Creator show? That's the whole point of being a courageous creator. Part of life is death. And while we're here on this planet, we have a very limited amount of time. So we need to get busy doing the things that we love to do, loving our life to death, and just showing up every single day, even for the people that we care most about, because that's what it means, really, to truly live a journey of success. It's not all about achievements. It's about living. It's about helping. It's about supporting. It's about loving. That's also part of success of life. And another important milestone in your career, Yvonne, being a TEDx speaker. What a talk. So your talk is called Transforming Our Grief by Just Showing Up. I'll repeat that one more time for our audience. The talk, write it down. I want you to go and see this talk. Transforming Our Grief by Just Showing Up. What has been your responses from this talk?
Oh, it's been so wonderful. And it truly is a dream come true for me to be on the TEDx stage, because first of all, I have to let you know, I was terrified to public speak. So anyone out there who has a message who thinks, oh no, I can't do it because I can't public speak. Oh no, call me, because I took a 0 instead of public speaking in school. So I went from that to a TED Talk. If I can do it, so can you. So it was exhilarating and terrifying. And we've had hundreds and hundreds of people respond and reach out and say that they loved my message. I worked very hard it's challenging to craft a message in such a short time, and you want it to be so meaningful.
Yes.
But I believe that I shared the message, and just showing up is such a powerful message. That's why we created the actual I Just Showed Up movement. So the TED Talk continues to, every day we get feedback, and I'm just humbled, honored, and privileged to share that message, really.
I love it. I just showed up and I listened to it. And let me tell you, there are some quotes that she said throughout, powerful phrases. I'm not going to give it all away because I want you all to listen to it. Things resonate with us all differently. But for me, you had a quote. You said, grief shows no mercy. It arrives unannounced and uninvited. I thought about this and I was like, wow, grief shows no mercy. And then you mentioned that it can destroy relationships, success, and can destroy you. I want to touch base on this right here. How can it do this to people? How can it destroy relationships, success, and even them?
Well, first of all, I'm sorry for everyone listening. It's such a heavy thing, because then I also say, and grief is coming. I say pretty inspiring, right? It literally, I have met so many people, and it is heartbreaking that they are living, they are breathing, they have a pulse, but they're not alive, right? They are so stuck in their grief, because the truth is, again, in our society, it's like this big gap in our society, talking about planning and preparing for grief before grief arrives. We have no coping skills, no strategies, no soft landing. And so people think, well, I don't want to talk about that. That's very negative. And then their dog dies suddenly, and their dog was everything in the world to them. And people say to me, if my dog dies, I said, if, oh dear, okay, no. We're all a when, not an if. But they're on this, narrow mind. They don't even want to think about it. And they can't bear the thought of someone dying or a pet dying. And I think, oh my goodness, you are just setting yourself up for failure. And literally, people stop functioning. People stop having joy in their lives. Relationships fail because they can no longer, they're just like zombies, and they can no longer relate. And then people say, why aren't you over this already? You should be over this, because they don't know how to just show up. And why are you still talking about this? And I've seen so many families destroyed. And I also try to explain to people, you can have a grief attack 10 years after great loss in your life. And again, if people just acknowledge and allow your feelings, it will diffuse. But you see, because we want to fix people and we don't want them to be sad, so we say, you need to get better, you need to let this go. It's like, no, you need to feel it, and it's hard, and let's cry, and then we can move through. So success is another thing. There's so many wonderful change makers and leaders out there, and leadership training and all that is wonderful. If you are ill prepared for grief personally, and you're ill prepared for grief to just show up for those on your team, on your tribe, because I've heard people say, oh, how many days off do you get in the United States or Canada when the love of your life dies? You get a few days off, yeah. Right? Do we really think, right? Do we really think people are coming back to work because they're all emotionally stable and ready? Coming back because they have to. And they're coming back to a place that everyone's saying, oh, there's Joe. I always say Joe. There's Joe, his wife just died. Oh, this is so awkward. And now everyone's avoiding Joe because they don't know what to say. They don't know what to do. So not only is Joe grieving and having to come back to work, but now he's isolated and lonely because no one's reaching out because they're uncomfortable. Oh my goodness, we can do better. You can just show up and make the difference. Bring Joe a coffee.
Bring Joe some coffee. Bring him some breakfast or something, say hello.
Your favorite burrito. I'm so sad. This must be so hard.
The fact that you're saying this is so important, because the natural reaction that we have is, I don't want to go over to Joe and tell him I'm sad that his wife has died, because I don't want him to feel bad.
He already feels bad. Joe feels bad. He's feeling bad.
So we can actually approach it and acknowledge it.
Yes.
But that can help them by doing that. What if they break out into a cry or something right there in front of you?
Then what's wrong with that? Right. That's really to mess people up. What's wrong with that? What's wrong with having a good cry when someone you love just died?
That's true.
We
think we're hurting them, right?
Yeah,
but we're not.
Let's eliminate the polite conversation. That's another part of my message. Hi, Adrian, how are you? Oh, I'm good, thanks. Okay, if you need anything, let me know. Okay, thanks. And we feel like, okay, I did my due diligence. When people see me in the grocery store, they say, oh God, there's Yvonne. She might make someone cry because I don't do the polite conversation. I say, and people say, well, I don't want to ask them how they are. I know that they're having a hard time. So you can say, well, how are you today? How are you in this moment? Right? I know things have been hard. How are you today? I am having a really hard time today. Say, I'm here. Listen, I'll grocery shop with you. This has to be so hard. Can I hug you? And what if we cry? I think everyone will be okay. I'm okay if people say, well, it's uncomfortable. Yes, it is uncomfortable, and it's awkward, and it's hard. Just show up anyway and allow all feelings.
I love that. Just showing up and allowing all feelings. And I have cried in front of people. Yes, Adrian Starks has cried in front of people. Good. And I will continue to do so at times. And it's the most liberating thing in the world, because you're not holding back any feelings. And even for me growing up as a child, I was raised in an environment where most of the men, they didn't cry. We didn't see them cry. We didn't see them get really upset. And then I spent all this time holding these emotions in. I was afraid to express because I didn't want to be seen as maybe weaker in that extent. But I want to go to what you talked about earlier about someone telling us, oh, you're not over that. You're saying that again. You're still talking about that. I want to touch base on that because there are so many people who bully people into not expressing themselves because they don't want to hear it again. For instance, your story. I'm a speaker as well. Stories. We have stories that have impacted us deeply over time, and we express those stories. And yes, we do have to relive them when we're speaking them. Did we get over it? No. We learned to grow through it. We learned to accept it, embrace it as part of our life story, and use it as a lesson to help others. You can do the same out here. If someone tells you, oh, you're still talking about that, you just let go. No, you need to embrace that, feel it, address it, and maybe express to them that you need them not to say that. You need this instead. It's okay to be direct with people, especially those people close to you. Say, hey, I don't want to hear that from you. I need this instead.
Oh my goodness. Wouldn't it be so wonderful if we were all honest with ourselves and each other? Because there's two things I say. First of all, I say, when you don't know what to do, you don't know what to say. Here's a crazy question, or here's a crazy thought. Ask.
Mm-hmm.
Ask. And say, my husband Jordy and I have a wonderful relationship. One of the reasons is because I let him know exactly what I need. I don't make him guess. I don't think, oh, you should know how I feel. You should know what I need. I just say, I'm about to tell you something really hard. I don't want you to fix it. I just want you to sit with me and let me cry. And he says, okay. And sometimes we don't know what we need, but we know what we don't need. I don't know what I need, but I don't want any advice. Okay, right? Like, we just have to be okay with saying, I have to let you know that that's not helpful. And people are awkward because, again, they want to fix you.
Mm-hmm.
It's not your job to fix people. The greatest gift you can give them is to allow their feelings. And if you're tired of hearing it, that's okay. Imagine how hard it is for them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Just say, I know this is hard. Because if we actually acknowledge it and allow them to talk about it, they'll probably talk about it less because you've allowed it.
Absolutely.
Think about it, right?
I could talk to you all day. I mean, we could discuss this and
Yes.
keep going and going because this is a powerful conversation and I'm truly enlightened by the amount of wisdom, the clarity, the expertise you have on this topic in this field. And you're truly, truly a leader. And I'm so excited that you have decided to just show up out here from the 27 years of being that nurse to now being, ironically enough, helping people in your own field and supporting them. You basically created your own hospice. And now you're saying, I'm going to help these people the way that I truly believe I can help them. And that's how you're just showing up. Are there any new projects that you are currently working on to keep being the change maker that you are, Yvonne?
Oh gosh, Adrian, things get me up at 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning, and I am creating. So I have my book, of course. I do speaking and training, and I love that. We have our Facebook page, the I Just Showed Up movement, and we're going to keep on keeping on. But a few weeks ago, I had a 5-day challenge teaching people how to just show up. And I'm working on a very wonderful project, and I would encourage everyone to, if they follow me on my website, loveyourlifetodeath.com, they will get how to just show up tips, and also they will get my 7 takeaways, my principles that I believe are essential to live life to the fullest, learn to grieve and support others, and yes, have the talk about end of life long before it arrives and diffuse the fear. So those I have, people have said they are priceless resources. And I have a little project that I'm working on that will be coming very soon. So I can't let the cat out of the bag yet, but when they follow me, they'll learn more about it. And it's something, a resource that will be available to people so that when grief arrives in their lives, and it arrives again, and it arrives down the road, and for in the lives of the people they love, they will have this resource anytime, anywhere, when they need it most.
And you said it's loveyourlifetodeath.com.
That's it.
All right. And this, how can they be a part of this I Just Showed Up movement?
Yes, I Just Showed Up movement. Well, again, when they follow me on my Facebook, we have an I Just Showed Up page, a Love Your Life to Death page. And, people can reach out to us anytime as well. We love to connect and just, I'm learning as I go along. We always are. And I said, you never get great at this. Grief is still hard for me, but we can love and support and learn from each other along the way. So join our community. We'd love to have you with us.
Join the community, everyone. I Just Showed Up, and join that movement. This is the time, the era for people to show up. It truly is. We talk about expression and we're complaining about what's going on in the world, the problems, but talking about problems has never solved any of them. How do you show up in your life? Well, one, you're listening today to this amazing podcast with Yvonne. You're going to go to loveyourlifetodeath.com. You're going to get involved with the movement. I would encourage you to do so, to take on some challenges that she's going to give you at some point, because that's how you learn how to just show up. I also encourage you to watch the TEDx talk. Very powerful, very informative. And I'm going to give you the title again one more time. It is Transforming Our Grief by Just Showing Up. Type that in, comment on it, pass it along to everyone that you know, because we are in an era of grief and we need to support each other. Also, get the book, Love Your Life to Death, because life is worth living, but it's also important for us to understand it's a cycle. You can't run away from life. We have to accept the terms of what's going to happen, plan, prepare, as Yvonne has said, and to have this discussion that may be a bit uncomfortable. So we approach the end of the show where I have a question I love to ask my guest, the Courageous Creator question. So Yvonne, how do we truly just show up in our lives?
Oh, I love that question, because we are so busy just showing up for so many other people, we forget about ourselves. And what I would implore people to, this is the greatest way you can just show up. First of all, understand and accept that you have value and you matter, no matter what. And the very best version of you is your greatest gift to the world, but your flawed, imperfect, vulnerable, best self. Who knows how to just show up for themselves first? Who knows how to just show up for others without being everything to everybody?
Powerful answer. And this is why Yvonne is on this show as a courageous creator, because she is a change maker, ladies and gentlemen, because she just showed up and said, I'm going to create my own world and help others do the same. And she's navigating and helping people navigate their personal and business lives in grief, because grief touches us all. So we mentioned before today, grief, it has no mercy. It will show up anytime, uninvited, in Yvonne's words. So think about that for a moment. You could be going through grief and you may not know it. Someone else could be going through grief. Are you just showing up for them? Are you having this direct conversation? Try to take what we're telling you today, implement this into your daily habits, and to begin to just show up in your lives. Until then, I encourage you all to be that courageous creator in your life. This is the Purposeful Life Show and the Champion Up Podcast with myself, Adrian Starks, and thank you for listening. If you've enjoyed our podcast today, don't forget to give us that 5-star rating and subscribe to the show so you don't miss out on the powerful life-changing content on future episodes. Also, make sure to go to championup.net for even more life-changing content. Until then, I encourage you to be the courageous creator in your life.